Hello and welcome to Mental Health Monday. I am one part of our hosting, and that is me, Bryon, and this is the lovely Anna, who we have in person. Today's a special podcast because we're in the same room, same house, same household, and that's pretty great. And this is, of course, the lovely Anna. We're happy to see her in the flesh today, as we are both in one place. But as we like to remind you at the top of the episode, we are no professionals. We don't have any degrees in this type of job. We are just people living life as it comes to us. And in the same sense of just being here many moons, we want to be a relatable podcast and come at you with, terminology and talk that is as baseline and level as a normal human can do with a lot of life lessons and all the good things. But today we're going to be talking about building healthy romantic relationships. Boy, we love to talk about that. Get your juice out, get your tea out. We're about to sip on this because last week we went over this and we got into it and found out that, hey, there's a lot more nuance and there's a lot more things that we got to cover and talk about a little bit easier because it is a sensitive topic. So this is part two and we get to do it in person, which is even better. So I'm going to throw it over to the lovely Anna on where we left off and where we're headed. So,
Thank you, Ryan. It's such a pleasure to be here and to be here with you in person. We don't get to do this often, being several states away.
hey, true.
But yeah, we're finishing up our conversation about healthy romantic relationships. And, like you're saying, there's a lot of nuances and there's so much more than we can include in a podcast that can dig in deeper into different areas later down the line. But just to give an overall synopsis of what some of the key foundational things for having a healthy romantic relationship may entail, what some of the things look like, some examples of what it may not look like, etc. And I believe we left off last week on boundaries, healthy boundaries, and what they can do for relationships, specifically for romantic relationships. So healthy boundaries are really meant to protect our overall well being while respecting both parties. To be able to vocalize our needs and to, know when our cutoffs are, know when we need some time alone, etc. Do you want to, I guess, discuss what some of those examples could be of having a healthy boundary?
Yeah, I think, one of the great things about any relationship I've had in the past couple years that have been way healthier than anything that I've been into. And it goes a lot to just finding out what each of you need. And one of the big things that we have our own alone time. We have our own hobbies and we do things that are separate, and have friendships that, they may go out with somebody and go have a good time. And I'm not use it being my anxious self and being worried about that, just like having boundaries where you mentioned it before, like, hey, just check in, let me know you're doing okay, kind of thing that helps that type of thing. But I think, having alone time, having your hobbies, having, family, friends, and just really having things that you both can do and do separately so that when you come together, there's more of the connecting on that time rather than trying to make everything like a relationship thing where you just go, this is what I'm into, amateur hour. What I'm into, you're into, and then you get engulfed into the same thing, and then you really don't have any separation. And that's what I used to do, and that's where I didn't have boundaries before, and knew thought with my anxious style I couldn't have these things and intermingle them with my other person. But when I found like a healthier relationship and had boundaries that we talked about, communication's huge. So we got to go and say, hey, I'm gonna go do my hobby for a couple hours, you can do whatever you want, and and trying to, communication's big, but you got to just like let the other person know what you need. And then a lot of things that we build ourselves on of like, hey, I need to do arts and crafts or something for a couple hours and this will help me, get to a better place from work, from life, from stress. And then when we come back together, I'm not coming to you from that place of, hey, like all this shit's stressing me out and I'm just gonna barge onto you with it. It gives us that little bit of space, but that's a really healthy boundary. But it's through communication that you're both okay with that because you got to find out what's good for each other. But there's a lot of great things that we need to really center in and just remember a lot of relationships, and I'm not saying all relationships kind of go south when we make everything one centered universe. I think what I've learned in my time is having different boundaries and knowing that it's going to be okay to have boundaries. You know what I mean? We can be separate people in the same relationship, and that's really going to build something a lot stronger. So we don't have to like everything has to be with each other. Some people can make that work, but I find what works for me and just knowing how many bad relationships I've had to try to involve my partner into whatever I'm doing and they get engulfed in that. I don't really have any time apart from them at that point, and that makes it real tough to connect because if we're in the same world all the time, same things, that's where you kind of just don't have any separation. And when you do these things, you take your time and have these nice boundaries of like, hey, I got to have some alone time, I got to do this, and things like that. You see how when you come together, it has more of an effective balance, which I didn't have before. So it was really hard to like being anxious. It was the biggest part, like, oh, we can't be apart. Like, we got to do everything together. And then you get healthier, you start working on yourself, figuring out why you're anxious and want to do all the things with the people. And you set some boundaries like, hey, I'm actually a better person when I have my couple hours to do what I need to do to get myself in a better place. Cause then you meet your partner in a place of having that where you're not just connected on everything and everything you guys know about everything. It's just like the married couple that knows each other's stories. Sometimes they get twists because you guys get time to,
Yeah.
alone and you come up with different ways of saying things. So it keeps things more interesting when we have a better chance to say, hey, I need things. Communication. That's just like the biggest thing that I really was really terrible at forever. So
Yeah, yeah. You said several good things there that I also came, from my experience too. It's like somebody one of my exes had said something really good one time and it makes perfect sense. It's like, we have you have you time, I have me time, and we have we time or us time.
yeah,
And, and a lot of what relationships are, and a lot of the cool parts about relationships in general is sharing our experience with other people, giving them our account of what happened and our account and like being able to share some cool, exciting thing, like,
yeah,
oh, yeah, we had this great experience. We had this great show that we just put on. Let me tell you about it and fill you in. And, not everybody we can't always have the energy to do all the things. We want to be able to take care of ourselves, to be there and support other people, to support our partners, but we can't always do all of that. And so having that time where, you go and you do your show and, I, say I would stay back and like be able to take care and do whatever I need to do. And then you can recount it back to me and be able to share that experience. But then there's also times it's like, okay, well, I want to learn a little bit more about what my partner's interest is or see that firsthand, being able to go to one show
yeah,
and, it's a show that works along with my schedule and be able to be there to support. And that's where it comes in together or to go to do a new experience that neither of us have done together. And have that and create a new experience that way. So yeah, really having those different boundaries as far as alone time. And, the same thing with like boundaries with work, being able to understand, not only for ourselves, like, yes, I need to be able to have a and this is like work life balance, which is very, very challenging, especially nowadays. But having that for our own mental health, but then as well as if you are, say, living with a partner and or even if you aren't, to have that balance so that our time isn't completely spent with work. We carve out, we make sure that we spend time for work, what is needed for ourselves, as well as for spending time with our partners. Same thing with like family members. I know that that ebbs and flows at times, especially if you have a family member who is going through a tough time, is sick, whatever. But having somebody that is, fully dependent upon us family wise, but also needing to make sure that we protect the partnership, the union, so that way it doesn't completely affect the relationship too. It will to an extent, depending upon what situation is, but making sure you have that balance so that way it doesn't affect the personal relationship too.
yeah. I think it's something that I've learned through many bad relationships to get to a point of understanding that there really is like, a need for independence of your own self, of both of you, really. Like, it really does take two to tango, but it also takes two to do your own dance to come together for that final tango, if you know what I mean. So, yeah, just building those healthy, like, hey, I need this. And, what we talk about, going to be, saying it a million times over. It's really when you get better at communication and knowing what you want. So like what we did season 1 where we get do our homework to find out about ourselves is really where we find what we need, and then we take that and then we communicate. And then, it's just like how we talk about, you just put things into practice little by little, and then you see like, hey, today, like I work with stuff, I need an hour to like kind of like center myself. If you meditate, I try to meditate at least like 5, 10 minutes a day. And what that means is different to different people, but I just need that silence and I just get in a state where I can breathe and then just really like gather myself because I've been so bad so many times in life, and doing all this mental health stuff has helped me get to a place where I go, I'm going to be better in 10 minutes than if I don't do the 10 minutes. And then, like, now I'm comfortable to ask for that or
Yeah.
say that, like, hey, I need that. So, like, you become a little bit more independent. I think that's like a low key, high key point of like a healthy relationship can be a lot better if we communicate, but we have to find out through the homework what we need and what works and services us. So to be in a good, healthy relationship, we have to be in a place to know what we want. And I think that's where a lot of my past relationships and anything that has gone wrong even with any kind of relationship is because we're not sure what we want, and it's not always us, it's the other people across from us that are our partners as well, or anybody else that like they might spit out what they need and want at the moment, but it changes as we do as people, we change. So like we have to be open to that, but also that's how you grow, you kind of learn as we go. You stop like shouting out what you need, and then you start communicating, and
Mhm.
then you find out what works, and that little bit by little bit, as we say, really puts us in a good place to like, hey, this works, and it's making me have what you said, the we time together,
Mhm.
being able to connect better because I'm coming at it at a better place, and we can tie this all in a nice little bow with like conflict and resolution to be able to come back together and have conversations that are tough and things like that. But that's like how this works. We can come back and like when we have that cool down time or like you have a conflict and you want to go and say, hey, just need 10 minutes, need to go for a walk and like breathe this out and come back as a better person to have that conversation is the same thing for having the me time turn into the we time of with your partner so that you can be like, okay, this is what serves me. And then I'm going to come at you as the best version of like, I'm going to be more centered. And then we can have the we time be about us. And
Mhm.
I think that's where a lot of relationships go wrong is just trying to butt that everything together and they don't get that independence to be able to have when they come together be that. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So that's like where I was wrong all the time, trying to involve people all the time in my relationship stuff, anything I'm doing, because they're just like, we have to be together. Anxious. You can't be away from me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Downfall, bad relationships, tons of them. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because of that. And then you find out that you need that. There's a lot to benefit where just like we try to be better as people to be better for relationships, no matter what they are. This is a great example as well, as where you have to find out what you need and service that by asking for it and communicating what you need.
Mhm.
And then that drives home like such a better relationship when you have somebody that you want them to be around for a long time. You find out, hey, like when I'm just doing my thing and you're doing yours, and we're gonna be like, okay, well, I'll be up in a couple hours, like whatever. It just comes together a lot better because then we can concentrate on that time rather than just trying to fit it in. And then your mind's going a million miles an hour to be like, we gotta do this right now. I only have this much time, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like you can come together at a better point. That's
Yeah.
really like such a healthy thing to learn, which I've learned. I mean, I've had plenty of mistakes,
You
have
learn
tried the wrong
you learn it
things,
that way.
yeah, but since I've
Yeah.
gone down this mental health journey, it's kind of what I found to be the most effective for any kind of relationship. So,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And like, I just think of where the example of, say, like, you have a partnership and both of you are at a friend gathering or a party together. And, if you know that if you could see that your partner is starting to fade and maybe getting a little too, stimulated, like overstimulated with the social crowd after a while, and knowing that that is a normal thing for them, that it's not the company, it's not necessarily who you're around. It's just, okay, different things and maybe a little bit too much. They need some time. Being able to, first of all, have those conversations ahead of time and know your partner a little bit better that way. And then have somebody recognize that and be like, hey, you doing okay? How are you feeling? You want to stick around for a little bit longer, or do you want to head on home and decompress? Knowing that and having somebody in your corner to do that, vice versa, it makes a huge difference. And then you can have those conversations without having conflict or having any kind of gray area where it's like, oh, well, they're just sitting over there in the corner. What's going on with them? But being able to have those conversations like, hey, if you see me kind of like take a step back, that means that I may just need a moment. But if I'm really starting to fade, this is yeah, I can usually last around this amount of time. But if there's a lot of noise, a lot of people may get overstimulated and either have a plan of action. It's like, okay, you drive separately if one person wants to jet on out and like get some downtime before you go to sleep, or if you want to leave together and just kind of understand that. And that's where the compromise also comes in. So really having those conversations and learning to, I guess, getting to know your partner and devising a plan of action for different scenarios like that. And, boundaries can be a lot of different things. Those are just a few examples. Same as with technology or finances, knowing, okay, well, you have these bills, I have these bills, and we come together to say, pay these ones, and to have different limitations for ourselves and for as a collective, if you are sharing finances or coming together to take care of finances, those are conversations to have and to know what each other's personal boundaries are, as well as to game plan and come up with that collective understanding. Just because that way it protects you as a whole. You can make sure that we spend our money on the things that we want to and need to effectively without being surprised as much.
Yeah, that is part of lessons that I've learned, but we can really hype that back to, like, having the communication and compromising and stuff, and really that's how I've been able to have better relationships is knowing what I need and this is a downfall that I've had because we just said finances. Like, I stress about that, and I came from the Disney era of movies and how things should go. At least, like, that's what I grew into, and maybe saw it from my parents itself, kind of thing. But like, the man carries the weight. He does this amount, and if he's not, he's lacking or
Hmm.
anything like that. So, like, what I've learned, which is, was hard for me to swallow, but also understanding that if I just talk to my partner about like, hey, like this is what's going on financially, just like voicing out, like I said, instead of playing everything up here and having the conversation with myself up in my brain, I can have the conversation, even if they're not have much to say back or just like whatever, it's helping me feel better. And then
Hmm.
that's where you find out about your partner and you can relate to them. And then that is me letting them know, like, hey, me just saying it out loud and telling you what I'm stressing about financially and a bunch of things, but financial is what I'm talking about right now, and just telling them like, "Hey, this is what's stressing me out. This is what's coming up." Things like that, and then you learn by knowing what you know about yourself. That helps the
Hmm.
relationship in whole because they can either just be like, "That sucks," or they can just like try to help you. And then like that has been the toughest part for me is being like, "Oh, you can help me," because of everything in my preconceived notions and how I was kind of like believer in like the man takes care of everything, all this other like, societal things. And then just to come to find out, it's like it's okay to be helpful. It's okay to get help. It's okay to just like rely on the other person because you have that trust, but it's also getting to know them, the communication. And then the compromise comes in. And then that makes life so much easier when you're not, stressing up here and having downward spirals as I'm
Yeah.
very famously ADHD for overthinking things. So like it's helped in so much and it's a lot of like finding out about myself and just like saying it out loud is a huge deal, but it also helps my partner understand where I'm coming from because
Hmm.
that's like the biggest thing with healthy romantic relationships is kind of letting them know where you're at. The communication is very big because then that could also give you information on how they take you as a person. And that's like you
Hmm.
start to find out things by little, just keeping like things coming out. And like when you have your we time where it's you and your partner, you can have those conversations rather than coming straight from work stressed and like, hey, like, and that's why
Hmm.
you come out with that energy. But this is where we find the independence and everything else to kind of like let me get it straight. And so I can
Hmm.
be more of a clear headed person when
Yeah.
we have bar time. And I know it's hard for some people to see that, especially in the moment. I've
Yeah.
had that too. You just like, I'm in a mode, I'm in a mood, and then like you're my partner, so I'm just gonna you're gonna take it, right? Like in
Yeah.
that way. So and then it's just like so hard, but you learn, yeah, you learn like, hey, maybe he needs to chill for a minute before we
Exactly.
have like any kind of real talk. You know, people who start like asking questions as soon as you walk in the door for work, it's like
Yeah.
you're never gonna get a good version of them. So you gotta,
Yeah.
but you learn that through communication.
You can learn to protect one another around others too. It's like, if I see that, if we're at a party and I see you getting a little, looking around, getting a little antsy, that overstimulated, I can recognize that then and be like, hey, let's go find a place where it's like a little bit quieter, a little bit less stimulation to like kind of chill for a moment and breathe. And then we could see where I want to go from there. It's helping each other out and being there for each other. I know for me too, and one thing I try to communicate with anybody that I've ever been with is, sometimes I tend to overstep my own boundaries. And I mentioned that. And so I also want to be there for my partner and for other people. And so I not only overstep my own boundaries, but then I also start to I guess, take a little bit and do a little bit too much or over give sometimes when it's like, they may want more independence to be able to do those different things. It's like me coming from a good place of wanting to help, but sometimes it's better just to kind of sit back and like allow things to happen, allow them to handle their own things. You think about like a kid, like, oh no, they want to do it by themselves sometimes. And so, communicating that, it's like, hey, sometimes I overstep my own boundaries as far as like work, whatever and feel free to like point it out to me if you catch me doing that. I may be doing that because that will help me and give me information that I may not see and be like, oh yeah, you're right, I should probably chill and focus in on these other things.
And you really just learn that by having those moments. So just know that none of this is easy and none of this comes out of the clear. You can't just be like, we're gonna have a conversation today and how I feel and what's going on with me and what will make this relationship better. It doesn't work that way. We run into these situations and we see what serves us and what doesn't serve us. And I think that's one of the bigger points on what you just said is just like those steps don't get easy to be, the things I talked about didn't get there until plenty
Mhm.
of bad relationships, and I had a lot of hand in that, which I understand now more than ever, but, like, just finding out what each other needs and definitely feel you on the doing too much. We talk about the battery thing. We don't want to give out too much of our battery and we drain ourselves without recharging ourselves. So I think a important takeaway that I heard out of that stuff too is just like it's perfect how you put it where sometimes we just need to step back and let them vent and stuff. And that's where I've learned a lot of where I gotta shut the up, you know what I mean? And let them talk. And then I don't have to solve their problem. That's like the biggest like mind explosion that I've been able to get to a point where I can say they just want to say that. They just want to get it off their chest. They want to, and that will make them feel better. And just me talking about my finances is the same thing. Like I don't expect them to just be like, here's a bunch of money and solve your problem. Like I would be
Exactly.
trying to do from the other side, but realizing that no, like a lot of the communication can just be one-sided in a way of that's going to help them get stuff out, and that's like a big lesson. So like listen up, men especially. Sorry to be putting it in a frame here, but just listen sometimes because that's all they need. And that's really like something I've learned where as somebody that's anxious and wants to fix make people happy, right? And we like our boundaries become nothing and we jump over them to save our people, and we really do ourselves a disservice and them because a lot of times what we don't understand is they don't need us to solve the thing. They just need us to hear them. And that's like such a big I've learned that. And I tell you many moons of effing that up for sure, of just trying to solve problems rather than is this a moment? Now I could take that and be like, is this a moment where they just need to just say a bunch of things and like just kind
Mhm.
of get it off their chest?
Yeah.
And I don't have to pick at one, my ADHD brain of being like, the first thing you said I can solve by doing this. The second problem you had, I can do this and we can do this. And then like that's not what they want. It's not
Yeah.
gonna help. It's just they want to tell you so that they can just like I said, instead of having internal conversations, we can have get it out
Yeah.
and it feels less. And that's what a relationship
Yeah.
great,
Yeah.
romantic relationship is in that regard of a healthy one of like we know our part.
Yeah.
But you only find that out through having bad parts and then learning from those. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So you trying to solve every problem as they say it, us
Yeah.
jumping over our boundaries to try to do too much to make us people
Mhm.
pleasers, like go after and be like, we can solve this, we do this, and just realizing it's really just about like even if I do have to help them solve it, it doesn't have to be that right that second. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So like
Exactly.
you kind of sit back and like see if they want help with it rather than
Yeah.
jumping to the A, B, C, D, V of everything that you could do to make it
Yeah.
better. So,
Yeah, and sometimes even, like, asking a question, or if we know, if like, say, if I'm wanting to just share information and vent, being able to, if I know that up front and just saying it, "Hey, can I vent to you for, like, 10 minutes?" Then firsthand it's just me venting, and then if you do think that, and then I can say, "Oh, well, can if you see anything that I may not see, or if you have any input in on this, to actually say that to the other party. Like, hey, what do you think? Just that simple. Hey, well, I'm going to vent. And also, what do you think? That gives the other person a clue. Hey, they want feedback. They want either, some questions to kind of help them understand the situation better, or to help them solve or see different perspectives. And then also too, if it's unclear as to whether the person wants to just vent or they need some help with it, just to ask, hey, well, do you want to just let it out, or would you like some input on this? That is a very simple way that we can regularly ask and understand what the other person may need. And sometimes we may not know what we need, but to have somebody to have that communication with back and forth makes it a better place to, well, first of all, we know, okay, they are here for us and they actually care how they show up and support us, and they just want to know how to support us best in that scenario.
yeah, I think that's where I've messed up so many times is just not knowing what they need and then expecting, like that whole thing where we can't just we make our own determinations and our own like, hey, this will totally fix everything and this is how it should be, this is what it is, like that assumption. We
Mhm.
get in trouble when we assume things and not voice things. The communication is a big part of that. So I failed so many times in that of like solving problems when I don't need to solve them. And I'm just like now at a healthier spot that I'm in, I can go, how you figure that out with your partner of like, hey, like work was tough and you just want to vent it out rather
Mhm.
than me trying to be like, well, you should tell that Sally to go F herself. You know what I mean? Like that's not the information they want.
Yeah,
They just want to get it off the chest. And like
yeah,
that's been the biggest growth for me is just understanding where I
yeah.
should be. But you don't find that unless you start to do
Mhm.
things slowly, just like we do all the mental health things. It's just like bit by bit, slowly kind of integrate these things and then you find out what we each other need in the sense of like I've been able to shut the F up and listen and then not have to like overstep my own boundaries or just like, if they're having a bad time, they can have their bad time and I don't need to fix that. And that's like for somebody that's a people pleaser, that's hard to do, but it's so much better for a healthy relationship when you start to find out what is better for both of you and what
Mhm.
they really want and then they can give it back to you and you're not exerting too much but you only find that through communication and just like little tiny science experiments is what we say a lot. It's
Mhm.
like it's all about trial and error but it's like for me to learn that like just listening and not problem solving is like a huge thing for any healthy relationship I've been in is to not fix everything and not be the man of the relationship and just have everything to just fix and do all this other things and just listen. So as you're saying all those things that just screams like yeah, it took me a long time to get there but understanding that you'll get to learn your partner what they need when you have these issues because they're always
Yeah.
going to come up. That's what a healthy relationship is being able to handle those types of like, well, they're having a bad day today but since I've been in this relationship enough and I've learned from it that this is what they need, and if it's not what
Mhm.
they need, we'll figure that out. And sometimes we don't know what we need, so it'll go a little sideways. But we have
Mhm.
the backbone of a healthy relationship to kind of fall back on. We can come back to it. That's it's a big part of all of this. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Having that healthy interdependence, because, you're kind of touching on that too with like dependence, interdependence, and independence. So, like dependence would be if somebody, completely depends on somebody else for, like all their happiness, well-being, etc., which is a lot. I mean, even we try to teach children too, you want them to have healthy independence of their own, to know right from wrong, to be able to make their own decisions, good or bad. And it's hard to see people making some not so great decisions, but also too, you want to be a functional human being in society, we need to have our own somewhat of independence. But then there's also the extreme of that, which is like extreme independence, where it's like, okay, I don't need anybody to help me with anything. I don't need anybody to be there to support me. I've got it all myself. And that's just carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. But, interdependence is being able to have a blend of those different things, to be able to know the different people that we can go to if we need some assistance, if we need support of any kind, if we need an encouraging word, if we need somebody to lean on for different things. And then also, being able to have our own independence and being able to make those decisions and know that we have somebody that's there to support us as we're making those decisions. And yeah, so like in romantic relationships, it's having that interdependence where it's like, okay, I'm going to handle, I can handle these different things on my own. I can make these different decisions, but also too, I know that I may wanna, like, run something by you. May wanna, like, bounce ideas off of you and get a perspective and then include that in my decision-making process. And also know too that, hey, you're gonna be there to support me if I make a stupid decision or if I make something that it looks like to be a good and then it goes south. So, yeah, having that healthy interdependence and know that you have somebody there that's got your back.
Yeah, it's all about, finding out, doing the experiments of, like we said, having a good balance of people we can go to or do things. And like, that's the science project of it all, like where we find what ratios kind of help and what is really like, but you don't find that out unless you incrementally just put things in together. You know what I mean? So, the relying on friends, the family thing, or just needing time by yourself, but knowing that it's not the end all be all, as like you're saying, the hyper independence, extreme independence type thing where I have to do everything on my own. I have to do all this. I don't want to burden anybody else. It's just not a great way to go about it because we're really, not being able to do a service to either one of us if we're trying to do everything by ourselves. And I'm guilty as hell as that until, I started to figure out what I do need and did the homework on myself to be like, hey, really just need somebody to listen every now and then. And then I got to do the same for my partner. So, it is great to bring that up into the next part because we're communicating for the connection instead of conflict. And I think is what I was doing so easily was to not communicate and getting conflict off of that because I was assuming they knew what I needed, assuming, you know, or even worrying about the anxiety, attachment part of like, am I going to put too much on them? Am I going to, be a burden more than I'm going to be a partner? And like all these things that I kind of had in my own head, like, am I being too needy? Like they'll reject me. Everybody's got that little bit of a complex of being rejected because I don't think anybody goes through life without being rejected at some point. So that still lingers on from anything. So, they'll leave or, and this is like really big to be able to have the communication rather than having conflict off of what you both need but are not are expressing. And that's really where like the conflict goes less. And I have less conflict these days, which is a blessing, but it's only because we've done so much of having conflict to find out what is better tools and what we
Mhm.
and the biggest thing that I can always say is like communicating. It's like as simple as that is really like because you're gonna get what you need or you're not gonna get it, but you're not gonna get it if you don't communicate. So
Exactly. Yeah, and it's like and it is difficult because it requires a level of vulnerability. It requires a level of truth telling to ourselves and really assessing ourselves, assessing what we need, assessing our state at that time, looking into ourselves and being like, okay, well, how am I feeling truthfully? And what do I need at this time? And like, say, for example, if I feel disconnected from my partner during a certain time, maybe he is working a lot of long hours or very enthralled in like a project or something like that. And I can instead of saying, "Oh, well, you're not listening to me. You're too busy, with work. You're preoccupied," reframing that and saying, "I'm feeling kind of disconnected recently. I know you've been really involved in work. What can we do? I know when's the project going to end, or like what can we do to kind of reconnect a little bit better and bring ourselves in there in that portion too, to see, okay, well, what can I do to better connect with you during this time where you may be a little crazy at work? So yeah, having that communication and coming at it instead of at a in a blaming aspect, but coming in being vulnerable about it and questioning and trying to understand and connect, because and we'll get further into this when we talk about healthy conflict and conflict resolution later. But yeah, really introducing that curiosity and getting wanting to know more. Like, okay, what's going on in your world? Really, I see this going on, but like, is there more to it? What is going on? And being able to express and say, yeah, I do have this going on, and I haven't really had the words to really put in that to you, but I am dealing with a lot right now. Thank you. And this is kind of what it looks like. Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad that you expressed that to me, because now I have a better understanding, and then I can gauge how I can be there to support, you know? So yeah, having those tools to be able to bring forth the connection portion versus having the conflict or having the incident divide.
Yeah, I think one thing that I take extremely from what you just said, and it makes the most sense in the world is like for me, what I've said in this episode a couple times is just like assuming and like assuming that they'll just know that I'm having a bad day and that they should be in a lighter mood to me or like hands and knees be nicer to me because I'm having a hard life, hard time, you know what I mean? And then why can't you see that I'm having a struggle? So like you shouldn't be up my sleep,
Mhm.
all that other things, like that type of talk, but, like, really, it's because I'm not communicating that I'm there. I'm just assuming in my head and having conversations on, like, where they should be for me, but, where I've failed so many times because I wasn't communicating that. I was assuming they could see and sense somehow in some kind of mystic way that I never even told them about, that they should just know that I'm not having a good time, so they need to be nicer to me or softer to me.
Mhm.
And then I realized, and that's part of the journey, is like I'm asking for something I'm not even telling them I need, and then that's like really where a lot of healthy things come from. Is like the communication, as much as we keep driving it home, but it's really important. That's what I took from your thing. Is just like I had this weird expectation of people that like they should know where I'm at, and I realized that I'm getting upset with somebody, and this is the conflict part of like, instead of coming at them like upset that they didn't know, I gotta look at myself and say, "Hey, did I ask for it?" You know what I mean? And
Yes.
like that's the biggest
Yes.
thing in a relationship that we all F up a lot, and where I've gone so long and had so many bad relationships where like I'm getting upset with them. And then if I think about, as we go through this journey, we go through our, different versions of ourselves and look back at these other unhealthy relationships and go, oh, I was mad at them because they didn't know I was having a bad day, but I didn't even voice that. I was just acting like I was having a bad day. And that's like, yeah, when you're in a healthy relationship, you kind of pick up on things, but when you don't communicate, then you don't know how to deal with those in different situations. And then when you start to be like, hey, this is where I'm at, the other person can engage and, I being on the other end of that, like, okay, that's where you're coming from. That's what your day is like. That sucks. I'm gonna back off a little bit, or however you learn in the relationship by like incrementally having different struggles and different things. You find out like, hey,
Mhm.
how to deal with these situations better rather than just being like, what, you couldn't see I'm having a bad day? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You had to bring that up now. Like how many times I probably said that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like terrible. I'm openly admit that till the end of time of like the many times I messed up. But like, once you start to do the homework and realize like you're just, you do the homework and then you're like, oh my God, like I'm thinking they're X-Men and they can like read my thoughts or something. Like that ain't how this works. It's not how real world works.
Uh,
But I had some weird assumption that like my
yeah.
body language can just tell them. But the important thing is communication, is getting it out. So
Yeah. That's
long-winded, but that's like really what I've
yeah.
learned a lot in relationships. To have like good relationships now is to understand that. Like I have to tell you where I'm at for you to help me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like as simple as like we can put it, but it's a really a big thing when you really can understand what that means. Like more than those words, you can understand what that means.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And because we're each seeing things through our own lens, and yeah, sometimes people can gauge and can read and assess, okay, they may be feeling this way, but not all the time. And so sharing that information is really important. I know I think of a specific incident for me where, some I was there for somebody else when, he was, not in a good space socially at the moment and needed to remove himself, and he was planning on doing that. And I'm like, let me go be with them to just give him a little extra support. If he says it's okay, asking, hey, could you use somebody there to support you, to be with you, while you take a moment and spend some time away from everybody. And yes, that was cool. Okay, I was there. And then the next day, when I was having a moment and could use a little extra support, I didn't vocalize that and say, hey, I could really use somebody by my side at this moment. I feel very alone. I didn't do that and just assumed that, yeah, because I was there and also too very person also very intuitive, but I assumed that they would assess that and want to be there for me, but they just didn't know that I needed that extra support. And then if I had vocalized that, he could have decided, yeah, I can be there for you, or I can't really at this moment, and I would have had to deal with it. So yeah, it's one of those things that we learn through sometimes our mistakes. So those are some of the best ways. And, one of the things I've been trying to really incorporate with anybody in situations is asking, what do you need right now? Or what would be helpful for you right now? Or how can I support you in this moment right now? And that is a great way to like start the communication. Sometimes it'd be like, you know what? I really don't know. Let me think about this because and then they have to check in on their body and where they are mentally and see, okay, well, how can anybody support me? Is it just sitting there next to you? What does it look like?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think just expecting people to know what we need without vocalizing is one of the biggest mistakes that I've made and we've made in that regard throughout any relationship where it's not bad or good in that regard. We just try to keep it, it's the intuitive thing where we think we know more
Mhm.
than, and they should know more. Like, hey, I supported you when I needed somebody or you needed somebody to like comfort you. And the next day I need somebody, and you don't understand that,
Yeah.
like, where are we missing? But it's the biggest thing that we learn is like we never said anything
Hmm.
to the person that's saying we need that. We were just like, hey, we did this. Where at? Why are you doing it for me? But there was never that communication of like, hey,
This is what I need.
yeah, a
I could
hundred.
really use your help.
Yeah, exactly. And we don't say that because we don't want to ask too much, but we assume that they're gonna know that, which is
Yeah.
like the biggest downfall that I've had so many times is just expecting this. Like what they say is like, don't expect,
Expectations.
yeah, like you what you give, you can't expect back, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't expect them to treat you the same way, and then that's where the communication comes in where you can just be like, "Hey, I need this."
Yeah.
And then it becomes such a lesser issue
Yep.
because then if you're not getting that, you said it out loud rather than you
Hmm.
going like this and hitting your brain to like get what I need, understand without words, like, and sometimes relationships get to that point where you can just know, but you find out through these things, that's how I look at all these things. So we just like that's how we repair though. Like communication is such a big, big thing is just like let them know where you're at and listen to them when they're voicing where they're at. And just like you said, he needed to be alone in the moment and like get away from the social situation and you respected that and then you gave him some love on top of that. Like finding that out is what you need to know of like do you want me to leave you alone at this moment? Do you need time to, you know what I mean? Giving the
Hmm.
options while also finding out information so that if you come across this situation later, which we always do, everything kind of repeats itself. Just like all this mental health stuff is we build up a better foundation so that when we come up to the same issue, you can say, hey, yeah, you go over there, chill out. I'll be right over here. If you need me to come over there, you start to have a better, be like, why are you being weird? Like you don't want to have
Hmm.
that conflict. You want to just be like, okay, yeah, you get this way, go ahead, go over there. Let me know if you need me. I'll be right here. And like that's where you build the foundation because you have to go through those awkward moments and those times where things didn't go as planned. But that's his life and his mental health is we fall on our face, but when we fall on our face, we start doing it less once we start to like find out what works rather than just like keep smashing our head, which I did so many times why I had so many bad relationships because I was doing the same thing, thinking I was right and I wasn't working on myself figure out like what was going on and not communicate. So we
Yeah.
try to get that repair, growth, and then intentional connection, the we time, to be able to bond and find out these things and be able to be in a better spot to come back to, hard situations that we get in, just like that you just talked about. It's like, well, when we come back to that, I'm going to have a little bit better of a space to understand from us communicating that, like, this will get us past this easier. And I understand now a little better on what you need and what I need in this situation. But you only get there by finding out, in the moment, and finding out through the situations that lead us to these inevitable relationship things, like we're going to butt heads at points, and we got to be able to come back to it and repair and growth and have, the connection that's intentional, so we can have these building blocks to the foundation of our relationship.
Yeah, and I think going through each of these different things, it's very telling of ourselves and like where we are ourselves and where our partners are. Say if we aren't curious, if we don't stay curious about our partner and or our partner doesn't stay curious about us, then that's information and that's something that we can have a conversation about. Be like, well, do you actually want, do you think outside of yourself for others, and not just like in a partnership, but in friendships and other situations. If we're so centered and self centered and center focused, which, as humans, we are by nature, but we also have to have a healthy balance of being, cognizant of other people and actually caring about other people. And so staying curious about these different things to understand and to come together because that's really what partnership of any kind, friendship, family is all about, being able to have your individuality but also being able to come together in different ways. And yeah, repair too. It's like you need there's going to be conflict at different times. It's natural, but can you come back and actually repair it? I know a lot of folks and I've been guilty of it too is it's hard to say, hey, admit I was wrong, or to have those conversations because we're afraid, okay, this person's gonna leave, this person's gonna reject me, they're gonna whatever could happen. But sometimes they may, but then other and that's information too. But then other times it actually is very refreshing. And especially if you have somebody that will work with you through it, we will work together as a team through it and has that same mentality, that's ideal because then you could see, okay, well, how can we resolve this together? You have that team mentality. We have an issue. How can we come together and solve this as a team? And being able to not only have our own accountability. Yeah, admitting when we screwed up, admitting when we could have done things a little bit better. And then having that reassurance that, oh, yeah, just because I screwed up on this thing, you're not going to leave. And having those examples to build on, that's what creates that safety and that, I guess, space to feel better about being more vulnerable about the next thing. It's like, all right, well, this situation, we worked together through it and it all went well. Now I feel a little bit more calm and I can know that I can come to you and we can work through this next thing. And yeah, reconnection after that. And I think a lot of people, they just like have conflict and brush it off and just ghost and just call it quits just after that. And that's no way to go through life. You have to have a good amount of connection and conflict in our relationships of all kinds.
Yeah, I learned that the hard way, for sure. As many of these lessons that I've learned is about, and I think one of the healthy things I can say on all that is I do these days a lot of check-ins with my partner in the sense of like once a week we check in, and that's just more to just find out where each other are with stresses or life and work, and like that keeps us in the loop with each other. And then so when we have conflict, it's not coming out of left field. We have like, hey, I'm stressing on bills, or hey, like this is gonna be a long week, it's gonna be a tough week, or just give them a heads up on stuff like that. I'm in two bands, I'm do a podcast with you, I do many things in life, but once I'm voicing and communicating, like, hey, this is where I'm at, this is what my week looks like, and
Mhm,
and then we find out where we are in a relationship. Like, are you okay? Are we okay? Is things good? Like,
mhm,
it's such an important and balancing thing to be able to. We have such less conflict now because of that, because we can see things coming where it's not building up. If they're
mhm,
like, hey, you're doing a lot of stuff and you're not hanging out with our we time. Can we set a day this week? It's being said out loud rather than building up and being like, getting mad at the other person for doing what they do, that
Mhm.
independent stuff. But like you can also bring it to their attention. And that's like helped so much in this way where like, yeah, of course you're important. We'll make time. We'll do this. And like if I can't this week, we can make a date. But it's also just putting it out there and showing the collaboration of two people being able to like compromise. And that's what a healthy relationship is like we avoid a lot of conflicts by just voicing and communication. Like I said, it's just like we're pounding that home, but like speaking out loud. It's like such a huge thing with a healthy relationship, which I didn't do before. I wasn't like telling my partner like how I feel or like what's annoying me or like thinking like, hey, I can't put this on them. And there's no
Mhm.
repair there and there's no like, the whole mental thing of like hoping they pick up on this stuff, which is just the craziest thing when you think about it. You know what I mean? Like nobody's really reading minds just because you're
Yeah.
like walking around the house mad doesn't mean they're gonna be like, well, he needs an extra hug and he needs kisses and he needs all these other things that's just gonna solve all of his problems because I don't know what they are, but I know he's angry. It just
Yeah.
like doesn't work that way. So
Yeah.
like just voicing and communicating is just like get it out of your head.
Yeah.
And then you throw it off the person that you're with, and then that way they can have you can see where they're at with you saying it in
Yeah.
live time. And then sometimes it's like a thing with the check-ins, like I could say something,
Yeah.
it resonates, and then the next time we check in, they bring it back up and be like,
Yeah.
"Hey, this thing that you said before," and then we can communicate it, and then they take their time with it instead of like that explosion headbutting thing. It's just like, "Hey, like you said this, just want to check in back in with this," and just like it gives you guys your own homework and it makes it healthier instead of arguing or coming at things where you're both at a point where you're angry about something. If somebody voices it and then spits it off the other person, you're at least building up a foundation of like, hey, this is like a connection that I'm going to be able to feel comfortable
Mhm.
being vulnerable, as we say a lot, and seeing where that goes and how you're going to handle that. You know what I mean? So that's just, it's important to communicate, to have this like intentional connection to be able to say, hey, like we need to set apart time from everything to even have those moments. Cause some moments can be just sitting on the couch together is great, but you can also have those moments where you're having a good conversation so that you can move forward with life and your relationship in a more positive way.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I love the individual check-ins, checking in with ourselves, checking in with our partners, and spending that time together. And sometimes, you have to be kind of creative in how you do that. Everybody has busy schedules and crazy things that go down. If you have a lot of work and stuff going on and maybe a partner can come in and help out, pitch in with something. And then after you finish that, then you can go and do something fun together that you both want to do, like go see a movie or whatever, spend some alone time. But yeah, seeing, okay, what are different creative ways that we can see each other and to support one another, celebrating those different wins, having that having that supporting goals. One thing to ask is, what does our relationship need in this season? Sometimes, it may need to be where we each have to are kind of going our own way to take care of a lot of craziness that's going on in our lives. But then, being able to stay accountable and regularly check in and ask, so, hey, you have this going on. How was this going on today? How was your day today? How are you feeling at this moment? Are you feeling a little bit better because you're getting through some of this? You're working through it and checking in that way. Different times call for different measures. And so our intentional connection can look a little different. It can be a little more at times. I've traveled to be up here. So my connection has just been like a quick check in here and there. Just to see, okay, yep, I made it safely. We're doing this and just sharing the fun bits of information. Then when we get back together, share the stories, share the pictures, being able to do that. That is intentional connection. It's a little brief, but we understand and then we can do the same thing, vice versa.
Yeah, it's really important to have that and have that communication because I think it really just makes everything work in that way. And I think, how I really have a strong relationship right now is like no matter how busy life is, all this other stuff, like even if we don't get together and have many conversations, maybe we'll eat dinner together down connection.
Mhm.
That's what I was trying to say with that.
Yeah.
But you don't get that until you have these check-ins and find out what's going on and what would be better for a situation to keep it going. So like our needs change and all this other stuff. So like there's that communication that if you're at least like letting somebody in, we'll have a time to check in. We're just like
Yeah.
unwinding together. So that intentional connection is way better to have when you can be apart. let them know what's going on, fill them in, and then when the time is right to have those stories, not trying to force everything into little patches that you have. You kind of sprinkle things in there.
And I love that example that you brought up too. It's creating rituals like that is so cool and so important because it also it gives you something to count on. It gives you consistency. So I'm going to work, come home, have like maybe a little time to decompress on my own, process my thoughts and feelings for the day, and then being able to actually speak intelligently to my partner about what went on, how I am, where I'm at mentally, physically, all that other good stuff. Instead of being like in a brain fog and not
Yeah.
knowing, oh hey, I don't know what I'm doing right now. Being able to speak from a better place and a more grounded place and actually share because we understand ourselves. Okay, this is what I was processing today. I'm still working on it, but and have those rituals like making sure you say, for example, you have dinner together, put the phones down, you have dinner together, you recount what's going on right now in your lives, or have that time at nighttime. Different little things like that, those rituals really help. It helps us individually and it helps us with our partnerships for sure.
And just so you guys know, I'm not a perfect man or anything, because when she said that, I could just think about the times I'm eating dinner and say, "Can you just put your phone down?"
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
as much as I'm greatly healed and all these other things, and I'm in a better place and all that stuff,
All
still
of
mess up
us.
quite a bit. And there's things that
Yeah,
we always do, and we're human, and we have, I
absolutely.
have a lot going on, a lot. I run a lot of things, but it's always out of love and from my heart. So sometimes we lose our focus, right? But then we get reminded, and that's where the good communication comes from. And I can say that, and I'm not gonna get upset by it because I get
Exactly.
it, you know. But
Yeah.
it's something that we work on, and it's just like everything, including mental health, is always ongoing
Mhm.
forever. So it's just getting stronger at different aspects to make things easier to go through. And that's where I see a lot of the takeaways of this week and last week of this discussion is like we build little by little just to get like in better habits and understanding the person we're with, and like even any type of relationship of like what to expect, what not to expect, and how they can take things, because that's what you learn with communication. Oh my God, did I say it again? Communication, communication, communication. Yes, we understand, but like I get that it's easier said than done, and it's just a word at the end of the day, but it really does make a huge difference. So
Yeah.
building that relationship comes from a lot of speaking out loud, seeing where that goes from the both of you, and just, you know, you start to put things out there and you see what kind of relationship you have just by doing that, and that's a big deal. And then you learn, and then that's where you can collaborate. You say, well, I can't be so abrasive when I say what I need. Maybe
Mhm.
I can say it later because I messed up a bunch of times. We got conflict from it. You find out better ways to communicate by communicating. So everything is trial and error, science experiments, all the stuff. But just understand that like we don't get here overnight, and these things don't happen overnight in reality. We have strong connections with people, sometimes too much, too little, but we find the good balance by just like keep going, you know?
Yeah.
Leave your heart
Yeah.
open for some love, and we are gonna fail at times. There's no doubt about it. But you
Yeah.
know, we're better to have had than to not have. So
Yeah. And I love what you said there too. It's like, and also too, at the end of that resolution in that moment, assessing and saying together, well, how can we better approach this in another instance? Like if this comes up again, how can we approach it? And it may look a little different. How can I and actually asking those questions, how can I better do this? How can I better ask this of you? Or how can I better be there for you in this situation? How can I better do this or that? Or how can we come together better in the next time? And really assessing and staying curious that way. And that's how we can continue to improve. And yeah, we're not going to be perfect. We're humans. So, but we can always, improve and do a little bit better and be there for each other a little bit better,
yeah,
ourselves.
I think fortunately and unfortunately we are humans, so that's what happens with these sort of things. But just quickly, those check-ins help, because what I found about trying to solve and fix everything as a people pleaser that I am, sometimes what I've learned, and it's such a big tool to use, is just like not to get upset in the moment. Sometimes we can take that and say, hey, this week coming up when we check in, I'll be able to talk about this. And then by the time we check in, it's not going to be fresh and I'm not going to be heated. I'm gonna be coming from at a calm place, and then that's gonna come back with some positive. Like they're not gonna be heated because it didn't just happen. There's like good to let things have space and air, and that,
Mhm.
trust me, is not something I was very good at. Waiting, being patient boy. I wait, I wait, I wait, but no, it's not my strong suit. So to understand that I've built up a tolerance to be able to say, "Hey, this really got under my skin, but I don't have to deal with this right now. We can bring it up, and I could breathe on this and think about it." So when we come back to a check-in, say, "Hey, remember when you did that on Tuesday the 4th at 2:32 p.m. and it really sucked?" You know what I
Yeah,
mean? You have a better
yeah,
way to say that
yeah,
as knowing there'll be a check-in to be able to have that and, like,
yes.
jotting things down in your brain, and I don't want you people to write down the time, date, and everything else. That was the funny example of just knowing, like, "Hey, remember when you said this?" That's all you need. You
Yeah.
don't need to go crazy homework, like, writing down, "She made me mad at 2:03." No, we mark it down mentally, don't get mad in the
That's a
moment,
whole
and
nother
it's
fight.
yeah. And we'll be talking about that
Yeah.
with the conflict and everything, but
Yeah.
today we'll be bridging it to the next episode. This was such a lovely time to be able to spend it with you in person. It's been Mental Health Monday, but we're gonna have her tell us what we were talking about in the next episode, as this one has been a beautiful and long one because relationships, man, they're hard to. There's so much nuances. I'm sure we could have gone for another hour. So, but we'll get into more of that things because as we get into season two more, we're gonna have reoccurring themes which we do throughout all of everything within mental health because everything connects in some kind of way. So, what are we gonna be talking about when we get together next time?
So, next time we're going to be talking about communication skills and repair strategies to help us navigate those moments of conflict. And so that way we can stay connected. You mentioned about having those check in times and knowing that you can rely on that. But a big part of that is also accountability, which we mentioned too, is staying accountable to that, staying committed to having those check-in times and following through with them because yeah, everything sounds great on paper if you are like, okay, well, yeah, let's talk about this later, but then you never talk. So yeah, so really
Guilty.
following up.
100%.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm very easy to forget about stuff.
Yeah.
That's my main thing. It's like I can say let's table it and then completely forget about it until it's like not the best moment to actually talk about it, and then I have to remember it again. So Dory brain. But yeah, so we're going to be talking about communication skills and repair strategies to help us, really give us a tool set to have those conversations. And it's challenging and something that we have to continuously work on,
Yeah.
just like anything else.
I love that. I mean, we touched on some of that today, but we'll definitely get into that next week. And it's been a lovely conversation. And, you would have been perfect for me 5 years ago with that Dory mentality brain because I'm sure we're both in both better places now. But yeah, been like, yeah, she forgot. This is awesome. Some people don't forget. That is what I've learned in my lifetime. But for Mental Health Monday, this has been the lovely Anna, and I am Brian, and it's been my pleasure. And to have her here is amazing, and we get to talk to you about something that we're both very passionate about, and just in person makes it 10 times better. And we hope you enjoyed, and we will see you next time
Bye. Take care, guys.
on The Price is Right.